everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About It. This is Susan Johnson, and I'm here with my co-host, Dennis O'Brien. And boy, Dennis, do we have a fabulous guest, right?
Yes, we do. We've got somebody from way out there in the valley of Connecticut, along Route 8, Ansonia Derby representative, Kara Rochelle. Kara, thanks so much for being on the show with us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. You know, Kara and I worked on a number of pieces of legislation, but first, let's talk a little bit about your history and your background. Tell us a little bit about what, you did before and what you're doing now, before you became state representative, and what inspired you to run for office.
Thanks for the question. I'm really proud of my background. I'm a born and raised Valley girl, and that really means something to me. It means something to folks out here in the sense that we're a really tight-knit community, and we're very service-oriented. I always kind of say we're the only area of the state with a "the" before the title, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the Valley. And I was raised in a family that was incredibly service-oriented. My great-grandfather, all my great-grandparents immigrated from Italy and other parts of Europe. And my grandmother was a registrar of voters for 43 years. My great-grandfather helped get sewers in the valley. He's been civically involved. And my mom had us volunteer in the community since we were little. My dad's been a volunteer firefighter for over 50 years. So it's really in our bones to be actively engaged in building a better future and showing up for people. One of the phrases out here is Valley shows up. We really do show up for each other. If somebody's house catches fire, if somebody's kid has a serious illness, if there's something happening that the community can rally around, we rally around each other. And so that was really important to me. I grew up involved. I went to college out of state. I went to school in New York. I was out there, running, doing business management, running high-end restaurants for about a decade. And then about 12 years ago, I wanted to come home and be closer to family. So I came back. And I was running a society affiliated with Yale for a long time, for several years, and was looking around the valley and just, in its heyday, I guess you could say, it was much more economically stable. And, I think that we're all kind of feeling the pressure of doing more with less. The middle class is really struggling. It's shrinking. More people are falling into the working class and having trouble making ends meet. And, the American dream is to have a stable middle-class life, to be able to afford to cover your bills and take the kids on vacation and, be able to retire with dignity. And that's something that's becoming further and further out of reach out here. And so I got involved because I've always kind of been that nerdy person that wants to figure out how to construct policy to make life better for people.
I love that because that's one of the reasons we're such good friends at the Capitol and that we work so well together because we both are very interested in providing for the middle class, making sure that we take care of all the people here in Connecticut. And it's great to have the reach between you and me in Eastern Connecticut and you in Western Connecticut. Dennis has a question.
I don't have a question. I have a couple of observations, Kara. I grew up in New Britain, Connecticut. I'm sure you've heard of it. Mm-hmm. And it was, I'm quite a bit older, and, everybody in my family worked in the factories back then. New Britain was home to not just Stanley Works, but about 17 or 18 big factories. And everybody whose parents I knew worked in the factories, and my cousins and aunts and uncles, and, it was a real factory town, blue-collar town. So I can relate to the, the blue-collar nature of the valley, in the Ansonia, Derby, Naugatuck Valley area. And I can, I've been a lawyer for 51 years, but I was only able to go to college and law school because back when I went, it was very inexpensive to go to UConn, and I went to UConn Law School as well, and it wasn't expensive at all. So I may have a white collar when I go to court, but my collar is still blue, and I relate to the blue collar situation very well, and I'm so glad that you all in the legislature and the governor are all working really hard. Kathy Austin from out here on recreating, to the extent we can, the opportunities for people to work in industrial plants like Electric Boat out this way, where Joe Courtney, our congressman, has brought in lots of potential for jobs, and the industrial, the industrial pipeline and whatnot. The other point I want to make is, you mentioned you went to school in New York. Well, we know where you went. You went to Fordham.
Yep.
And Fordham is. There was a time, everybody knows UConn basketball is king here in the U.S., but there was a time when Fordham used to play UConn back in my youth, and Fordham was better than UConn, and they were a tough opponent. and Fordham is the home of two of the greatest figures in American sports, and one of them is Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi, who was the coach of the storied Green Bay Packers in the NFL, and the trophy that's handed out every year to the winner of the National Football League, the Super Bowl, is named the Lombardi Trophy. He is a graduate of Fordham, played in a offensive line called the 7 Blocks of Granite. I learned that when I was just a kid. And then there was another one, a guy named Frankie Frisch, who was called the Fordham Flash. And he played Major League Baseball for the New York Giants when they were in New York, and also the St. Louis Cardinals. He was on 4 World Series championship teams and is in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. I know there's a lot of other famous people who attended Fordham, and I just looked at a list, and there's some people who are great and, in my opinion, not so great on the list, but there's 100 of them. So those 2 guys didn't make it. I was surprised, because they are the most noteworthy athletes that ever played for Fordham. And now Susan Johnson is giving me the sign that it's time for me to stop talking and to turn it over to her.
I have another Fordham thing to say, and that is our grandchild was just accepted to Fordham University, and she's on her way to start her college education there. So we're very, very proud of her. Yes, and she got a full free ride to Fordham. So
going to be a Fordham Ram, just like you.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
Yeah.
so we're very proud of our little grandchild, who is now gone to Fordham University. So, all right, go Katie.
Well, congratulations to Katie. I do have to say, Fordham was really a wonderful education. Their school motto was "Men and Women for Others," and they really live by that. I'm sure it's the same way it was when I went. I mean, granted, I've been gone for 20 years, but we had 80% of the campus volunteering in the community back then. I was tutoring in the local school systems, doing service work. A Jesuit education is very hands-on, and very immersed in serving others. So I really loved the education that I got from there, and I'm sure Katie's going to enjoy it too.
That motto you mentioned, I just came across it today, so it is still the motto, and I'm sure you're very proud of it. And Susan and I have spent years and years and years, although we didn't go to Fordham, following that path of helping others, and we were both in legal aid for a long, long, long time, and it's as you said, it's the Jesuit tradition, and we're very happy that our granddaughter's going there.
Yes, we are. We're very, very, very proud grandparents. So, but moving on a little bit about your what you did, but how about I'm looking at your biography here on the Capitol website, and we'll just talk about the great things that you've done for your first term and your second term, if you wanted to go into, and now you're in your third. But I wanted to just start with the first and just skim through them a little bit and just refresh people's recollection about some of the good work.
Well, thank you. I feel like it was just yesterday. I mean, as you know, it goes so fast.
Yes, it does.
It's time flies when you're busy. And I really approach this work as I'm going to use every moment to help others as much as possible. They've entrusted me and gifted me with this task, and so I'm going to live it to its fullest. So I was out the gate my freshman year, and one of the first things I did was I did 2 bills that I personally wrote, and then many I co-sponsored and helped with my freshman year. And one of the ones out the gate was to take the college-level manufacturing training classes. As you know, you can't get your foot in the door without having post-secondary education these days to get into manufacturing. So I took the college-level manufacturing training classes and wrote a bill to get them back into more comprehensive high schools, right? We have thousands of open manufacturing jobs in the state of Connecticut. I think we're at about 9,000 right now. And, the tech schools alone are not enough to get enough people trained. And so we have to create additional pipelines. And frankly, these are really good paying jobs. I don't think that folks realize that in Connecticut, we're a leader in the country on having some of the best skilled workers for manufacturing. And we are very competitive. And frankly, the pay, that is the stable middle-class job. And there's so much room for advancement. There's a silver wave coming. And so we really do need to get a lot of people upskilled into this field so we can keep these manufacturers and grow this industry. It's the largest growing in the state of Connecticut. And so I took this bill, helped to get more curriculum into the regular high schools, into the classrooms. Got a program set up with the machines at Derby High School in my district. And I didn't just stop there. What really informed me on this is the fact that my father worked 3 jobs when I was a child until he got his foot in the door at Sikorsky, which I don't know if you're familiar when you're into the state, but they build helicopters for the government. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so here's the thing. I was a teenager when I came home one day and my mom was cutting a cake. And I said, Mom, what's this for? Because it just said congratulations. And she said, your father got his GED. I didn't even know what a GED was.
High school diploma. Yep.
Yeah, and so my father got foot in the door at Sikorsky before he even had his GED back in the late 80s, early 90s, and that is absolutely impossible nowadays. You need more than a high school diploma. You need to have additional certifications.
That's right. I just want to say that because of the increase in technology, the students really have to have this what you have helped create where you are in your high school. They have to have that education on the new technological advancements and the manufacturing pipelines that you've helped create. We've been working here in Eastern Connecticut with Electric Boat and Pratt & Whitney, but Sikorsky Aircraft is another aspect of that. And this is fabulous work that you've done.
Yes. And we actually, because, as you know, this equipment is so expensive, I didn't want to just stop at opening it up for the high schoolers. I said, not only are we putting the rungs back on the economic ladder for kids coming up through high school, but if you make a mistake, if you drop out, if you weren't interested in high school, and then you realize that when you're 19, 20 years old or 40 years old, oh, shoot, I want to get into manufacturing, we opened up a program funded by the state and some federal dollars where we open classes on nights and weekends to adults. So we've graduated multiple rounds of adults in the community through a 12-week program where they get a certification and can get funneled into manufacturers in the area as well.
And this kind of is consistent with one of the committees that you're in the higher education committee, and this work that you've done is very consistent with the work that everybody's been doing in the higher education committee, which is so important. Also talking about community college and making it more available and accessible to everybody, so they don't have to pay those huge tuition costs.
Yes, and it's really I think that people used to think that it was required to do a 4-year degree, and in this modern climate, tech schools, trade schools, community college has a lot of programming that is similar to tech schools now, and it's so important that we made it debt free for the majority of students for a reason. And I have to say, I've met a lot of kids in my community that have. I met a young lady a few years ago that said to me that she wouldn't have gone to college at all if it wasn't for the debt-free community college program, and now she's in an advanced program and is going to go beyond her 2 years when she finishes. So this is really having an impact in communities like mine to set people up for success.
It is. It's really fabulous that we're in the legislature. We have people like you in the legislature working to make the adjustment to what the current economy requires, and that is that information that the students must have in order to get those jobs in technology and keep those businesses like Sikorsky Aircraft right here in Connecticut, keep Pratt & Whitney here in Connecticut, keep Electric Boat here in Eastern Connecticut here in Connecticut. Those are great jobs.
And the real good news, Kara, as you point out, is that it doesn't take forever to get through these programs and get yourself a great job. It could be 12 weeks, 16 weeks, whatever. And the jobs are terrific. They pay well. And, but you have to have that technical education. It doesn't take all that long.
Yeah, and there's stackable credentialing now. So you can go get your foot in the door. And a lot of these companies, Sikorsky has 213 feeder manufacturers, other companies that create things that then are used at Sikorsky. So what we're finding is that manufacturers will, we kind of get the individual, the first building blocks of training, and then the manufacturers will pick up and send them back for additional training. If you get your foot in the door at Sikorsky and you apply yourself, they'll send you for a 4-year degree. And well beyond if you're talented.
Well, that's fabulous. That's a wonderful thing to have, that opportunity for the students to get that foot in the door. That's great. Very, very excellent.
Yeah.
When I look at your list of accomplishments, and you've accomplished so much in just you're in your third term now. In a relatively short period of time. I mean, you say fast is fast. That's because it hasn't been that long. And when you're busy, time really flies. I know I've been busy ever since I got out of high school and started applying myself. And after the Army, I got into UConn, and I don't know. I think I haven't stopped running since. And I know the feeling, and you've accomplished so much. When I look at your list of accomplishments, and I'm sort of Susan's campaign manager on her campaigns, and so I know a lot about what she does, and we talk about it. And your record is very similar to hers. You're doing all kinds of things to try to help people better themselves. But in public school, in postgraduate school, everywhere, and that is so important. If I weren't a lawyer, I would be a teacher, because education is so important. And you're bringing back money to towns that really are not rich towns, okay, like West Hartford or Farmington or places like that. And that's what we have here. Our Windham is not a wealthy town. We've got, we welcome everybody here, and so we have all types of people here, and we have poverty, and we have people that are needy and need help, and so many people are moving on up because they're getting help from programs that are being developed by folks like you and Susan at the Capitol.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's funny. So Windham, I'm because I'm a bit of a both really passionate about the people in the community and advancing their stories and getting them to a better place, and looking at all the data and numbers. I look at things like our economically distressed municipality list for the state of Connecticut, and Sonia and Derby and Windham have all been in the top 10 for quite a long time. When I first came into office, Sonia and Derby were first and fifth in the state, and now they're, I think right now they're 8th and 15th. So we've made some progress. We've gotten them further away from being the number one most economically distressed. And more importantly, we're starting to lower the ALICE rates. ALICE stands for Asset Limited and Income Constrained and Employed. Those are our residents who are working and really struggling to make ends meet. We're getting the median income up a little bit. We're finding ways to chip away at that. And make no mistake, my community is still struggling tremendously. It's why I'm so busy. Is I will turn myself inside out to help the people in my community because they deserve that. But it's a really interesting process and something that I'm really proud to be able to do to create policies that help people, right? Middle and working class income tax cuts, eliminating taxes on retirement income, all of these things make a difference, truly, especially when you don't have a lot of resources.
It makes a difference in the lives of the people you help directly. Yeah. It also makes a difference in everybody's life. We're all better off when people are self-sustaining, when they can take care of themselves, when they can pay their fair share of taxes, and be, really supportive and helpful members of their community, and they feel better about themselves. And it's like it takes off, and I think we are taking off here, despite the fact that it isn't easy. But I think we've come a long way since COVID, and I think a lot of it has to do with the hardworking people in state government and in the legislature, and yes, in the governor's office.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's interesting, right? So I came in the door as a first-time legislator a year before COVID struck, and I've never been a shrinking violet when it comes to advocating for my community. My grandmother was very vocal and a great example for me of how to really fight for what you care about with gusto. And my father takes a quieter, more centered approach, but I've really learned from both of them. And I came out the gate and brought a lot of resource back to the community. You talked about the old factories. I've been racking up, bonding money, grant money from the state. Right now, the total is at $23.44 million to clean up the Ansonia Brass SHW Farrell sites, which is a collection of old factories. It's technically 4 properties, but they're all adjacent. It's about 100 acres of redevelopment space in our downtown. And as I'm sure you know, 100 acres of redeveloped space will absolutely make a huge difference when it comes to jobs and economic opportunity for people. So it's really humbling to be able to do things that to kind of move the chess pieces in a way that's going to set up the town for success and set up people for success.
That is great. We all know exactly that when people go to our downtown areas and they see things that aren't looking quite right, that it gives an opinion about the town that may not be completely spot on, right? And to be able to fix areas of the town that right up front, the downtown area, it means a lot. It means a lot to the people who live in the community, and it means a lot to people who are looking to invest in the community to see how things are going in the downtown area. And of course, with our historic areas that we have here in Wyndon, and I'm sure you have in the Ansonia area, it's very difficult because the buildings are old and they haven't been updated. And so it's been very, very difficult. Or if you have brownfields in your area because of previous times when we had manufacturing, those things have to be cleaned up. So bringing resources back to these areas really means a lot. It means a lot to the people, and it means a lot to being able to expand more economic development, which really, really helps our state expand its economy, and it helps the people get good money when they have a job in those local new jobs. So that's great.
I mean, you'll have to come down at some point. I mean, so I have 2 towns. I've got Ansonia and Derby, and they're both economically distressed. And I treat both my towns equally. They're both really important to me. The people are, I'm a Valley girl. They're all my people. And Derby, when I came in, they've been waiting for decades to get the downtown widening project done for the road. And the south side of Main Street was 40 acres of just kind of cratered empty land where there used to be buildings, and it is prime for redevelopment. And I was able to assist in getting shovels in the ground and money in place to get the Route 34 widening project started. It's now almost done, and between the Route 34 widening and the adjacent train station project, we've got about a $50 million state investment, and we had an article that came out just the other day about how Derby is prime and ready to go for redevelopment. It's on the precipice of revitalization, and that didn't happen by accident. That happened by a lot of hard work by a lot of people. And so I'm grateful for the governor's investment in the area. The Waterbury Rail Line runs through here, and I've testified for years fighting for the increased train service. We not only got the increased train service, but I brought the governor down and showed him both the downtowns and showed him the train station proximities, and we got money for brand new train stations, and we got the cars ordered too. So we're going to have a really top of the line train system out here, which is really important because we have so much developable space along the train lines.
That's fabulous. That'll go a long way towards a lot of the objectives that we have for the future for getting housing and that sort of thing. Well, we're coming up on letting our sponsors help pay for the cost of this show. So this is Susan Johnson with my co-host Dennis O'Brien and our very special guest, State Representative Cara Rochelle, and she's talking all about all the great things that have been going on in Derby and Ansonia. And we'll be right back after these messages.
Hey, Dennis O'Brien back again on Let's Talk About It with my wonderful co-host, State Representative Susan Johnson, representing the town of Windham and representing the town of Windham well. And speaking of state representatives who represent their towns well, our guest today is State Representative Carol Rochelle, and she is from the 104th District, covering Ansonia and Derby. And we're having a lot of fun talking to her and a lot of fun, comparing the struggles and the progress that are being made in Ansonia Derby by Cara Rochelle, and the progress that's been made by Susan Johnson here in the town of Windham. Susan?
All right. Thank you for that, Dennis. Really appreciate it. So,
you deserve it.
Well,
both of you.
But you know what? I want to talk a little bit about the bill we worked on this last session to make sure that the banks respond when when senior citizens find that they have to apply for the Medicaid program and the banks don't respond. And so we were able to get some legislation passed to get them to require them to respond in a timely way. And I can't say how happy I was to work with you on that issue.
Well, it was really wonderful to work with you, too, on this. So I'm happy to share with folks the backstory on this. This was something, I think that we build a lot of our policy around fixing issues that we find in our community or that we see that, our residents are struggling with. And I had gotten a phone call from a wonderful woman in my community who I had known. She was just this vibrant, bubbly, wonderful older woman who had spent her entire life working and volunteering in nonprofits in the community. And she got a hold of me and she said, "Hey, I'm having back problems. I can't walk anymore. I need Husky C. I need a home health aid. I'm falling on the floor. I'm burning my hand on the stove trying to reach up to cook, and I need an electric wheelchair." And I said, "Oh boy, let's get you taken care of," because she had applied to the Department of Social Services, but her application had been held up because the banks were trying to charge her $5 a page for every page that she needed to submit. And because it's a federally funded program, it requires 5 years of bank statements. So federal rules require 5 years of bank statements for her to prove that she is basically poor enough to qualify for the program. And then the banks are saying, pay $375 to get the bank statement to prove you're poor. And that's ridiculous.
It certainly is.
Yeah. So I reached out to DSS on her behalf and spoke with a staffer there. And I said, one, I'm going to find a way to solve this problem. What's going on here? Walk me through everything. And he said, "Listen, we have subpoena power. We can get these statements. The problem is that the banks don't ever give them to us. And
right.
If they do, it's well beyond the 45-day deadline. And so these residents, and mind you that Husky C is folks who are seniors and or disabled, and it's about 80,000 people a year. They're applying to these programs. They're getting caught up in the banks trying to charge hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And so they can't produce their documents. And these are folks that typically may not have a computer or printer, may not have internet altogether, may not have online banking, and don't have a means to get these documents over. And so I reached out to a lot of nonprofits to find out exactly how rampant this issue was, and found out it was pretty gosh darn rampant.
Yes, it is.
And so, it was horrible. And so I coordinated, I put a bill in and coordinated a parade of nonprofits to come through and testify. Mm-hmm. And really, the stories were horrible. A 98-year-old with dementia, they tried to charge, over $900. Just awful. And so, it took a year and a half, but we got the bill passed that requires that when DSS asks for a document on behalf of a person applying for these programs, they're to produce it within 20 days or else.
Yes.
And so this eliminates this struggle that people are facing. No one should have to wait, our most vulnerable in particular, when they're trying to get services for things like this.
That's exactly right, and I was just thrilled to be able to work with you, and of course, the chairs of banking, Representative Doucette and Representative Miller, were really very, very thoughtful and helpful. Boy, they're great to work with on these banking issues. I know there was some resistance by the commissioner, but finally we were able to break through on that as well. And of course, it's going to save the state a lot of money because waiting and processing things, taking things sometimes a year. I had my constituent situation was a woman in a homeless shelter going into a rest home and taking more than a year to get the process going, and not getting the information from the bank that they needed, and not getting the response that they needed. And it just reminded me of what happened back in the early 2008 when we had all these foreclosures, when we had that big crash, and we had to get the court system to work with the banks to make sure that the foreclosures were mediated, and that they might be able to do a new negotiation with the banks to let people stay in their homes and renegotiate it. But before we created that system in the courts, the banks were not responding at all, and so we're making them respond in this circumstance as well, and that's one of the things.
And eliminating junk fees.
Yes, getting rid of the junk fees too. So this has been a huge help, and I think we're going to see better processing. I'm going to be watching because, as you know, I sit on the Medical Assistance Policy Oversight Council, and I'm going to be watching for that new change and those quick responses from the banks.
Yeah, and now, I mean, it's going to be a game changer for a lot of people. I do want to make sure folks know we can regulate legally about a third of the banks in the state, but I've spoken to Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, who was very receptive of the idea of making this a national policy as well. I'm certain that your congressman would be interested in this too. So I think that we have an opportunity to not only help our seniors and disabled in Connecticut, but to really change the way that things are done nationally to create government efficiency and help those who need it most, and put people before the profits of banks.
Absolutely. I think that this is a super big problem all throughout the country, and it's just people are kind of stymied when they're up against the banking system, and and how resistant it is to working with people with the state government and also with the federal government.
Yeah.
Interesting. You mentioned Rosa DeLauro. Rosa DeLauro is another Fordham Ram. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Well, see that? I looked at the list. You'd be surprised who's on that list. It's on the internet. They have 100 people listed who were connected to Fordham. Another one is Vin Scully. He used to do the Dodger games on the radio and on television for many, many, many years. One of the greatest broadcasters of all time. But there's a lot of people, and you check it out, and you'll see some surprises.
Oh, I'm going to have a conversation with her. She and I, she's an Italian girl from this area of the state.
Yeah.
And she's known my family for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And I adore her and the way that she does things. She leads really well, but we're going to have to bond over that one.
Oh, well, hey, when you're involved in politics and government and trying to get things done for people, you do whatever you can. And, I try to prepare for these shows as best I can. So when I saw you were a Fordham graduate, I said, I want to check that out. I wanted to see if Vince Lombardi and Frankie Frisch were on the list. They were not. That's got to be corrected.
All right, Dennis, go for it.
Yeah.
But, I wanted to just mention one other thing about Rosa DeLauro, because when I first was elected and was sworn into office in 2009, Rosa DeLauro came to the Capitol and she said, what we should be doing is we should be creating a public bank. And I know that Governor Malloy tried to do that. And in the process of trying to create public banking, he actually created the Green Bank, which was a step, not quite a public bank, a Connecticut public bank, but it was a step in the right direction in terms of trying to create more access to sustainable energy possibilities, whether it's solar or some other thing that you might be able to get to reduce your costs and your emissions. So we did get the Green Bank back in the day when Governor Malloy was first there, and Commissioner Pitkin worked very hard to try and do a public bank, but it wasn't successful, and I've worked at that too. But right now we don't have a responsive commissioner on that issue. But I'm really, really glad that we're able to actually do this work and make sure the banks are responsive when people have that need. And the state and the people won't be losing like they have been in the past because of the failure of the banks to respond.
Well, I think that's really what public service is about, is adjusting policy to better serve people. What are we
Yes.
doing if we're not doing that, and finding ways to make life easier for people? I always say to folks, everyone I meet, I say, hey, you're my boss. Everyone in my district, nice to meet you. You're my boss. What can I do for you? And it's just a simple thing, but I think it's a good reminder for people. I do twice a month community coffee events, and specifically, I'm very vocal about making sure the public is aware of them, so that folks know that I am accessible, that they can talk to me, they can get to know me, that I'm listening, that I want them to be involved, and it's been really great. People show up. I had 20 people at each of my events each day this week, and really, it's great. I get my marching orders on things that they need from me, and share information with them, and it really, I think, it helps democracy, because it is democracy doing things like that, really engaging with the public and showing them how you serve them.
Exactly. That is exactly right. Making sure you connect with people. One of the reasons Dennis and I do the show is to connect with people and try and keep people up to date on what's going on at the Capitol, what's going on locally here in town with the local people. That's and it really helps people feel like they're part of a community. And that's one of the things that we're really striving to reconnect with people and make everybody feel like where they're living, that they have access to the resources and information that they want to know about what their government's doing.
Yeah. It's been, this session, one of the things I did is I got $100,000 for a park in the area, and for improvements to that park. And this is a park right near those old factories. It's pretty much almost all concrete over there. There's a very small playscape, and the park could use some love. And it's in an area of Ansonia that could use some love. And so I got this money, and it was ARPA dollars that I got written into our bill designated specifically for Gaddison Park. And the first thing I did was reach out to an alderman from the area who, he and I had been discussing for a while how we really want to fix up that park, and said, let's hold a public meeting and get everyone involved. Everyone that lives in the area, everyone that uses that park, should have equal say, should be involved. This is not a top-down. This is a bottom-up, because people deserve, to have a say in what happens in their neighborhood. And also, it's a way to really empower people and make them feel included. I mean, I think that a part of the time folks get frustrated with government because we're not communicating well enough and we're not including folks. And so I make it a point to really include people in the process.
That's wonderful. One of the other things that we did this last session was we made a property tax exemption for veterans who have a service-connected permanent and total disability rating. And I thought that was something that was really very good for us to be able to do. And it really helps people stay in their homes, just like the Medicare Savings Program helps people stay in their homes when we create a supplement for people, lower income people, to be able to apply to the state of Connecticut for supplement to their Medicare, which always requires some type of supplemental, cost. So it would pay for the 20% that Medicare doesn't pay when Medicare pays 80%. The Medicare Savings Program comes in and pays those kinds of things. These are the kinds of programs that really help people stay in the home and live their best lives.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
And I can see that you had worked at that as well.
Mm-hmm. It's been so important to me. I mean, we all have parents and grandparents, and time marches on, and we all get older. And I always think about how would I want my grandmother to be treated. How do we want what kind of society we want to have? We need to be doing things to make sure that people can age with dignity, that they can have their most fulfilling life, especially as they get older. And so, we've done a lot, especially in recent years, especially, this session and between cutting taxes and expanding funding for aging in place initiatives and really investing in opportunities for folks to live healthier lives longer into their retirement years.
Yes, that's, I think, important, and understanding that people need these kinds of opportunities, and and not having these asset requirements that they have for younger people, say, for example. But elderly people live off their assets, and that's what we want them to do, to be independent.
Well, my favorite issue that the Democrats in the legislature, and you two certainly are among them, that you have succeeded in working on and getting in place is what you've done with community college and the access to community college for people of lower income, and that is a big deal. Getting 2 years of community college for next to nothing or next to nothing for some people who can then move on if they wish to go to one of the state colleges or UConn or whatever. I think that is a really important because college has become very unaffordable for lots and lots of people, and that is a big problem. The other thing I wanted to point out was the great job that the Democrats in the legislature have done to follow what we should have been following for a long time with regard to the educational cost sharing grant. I'm sure that I noticed that you mentioned that your towns are getting a lot more money from the ECS grant. Well, so are we, and that's great because we really need it, and so do you, based on what I know about the valley towns you represent, and that is vitally important. And that is not a small gain. Those are huge gains for people who really need them. We need to go back to the way we approached education back in the days when it wasn't so expensive, that everybody's got to be concerned about educating everybody, because as I said before, when people succeed in life in our state, they not only help themselves, of course that's primary, but they also help everybody.
Yeah, it is so important. I did a master's as an undergrad when I went to Fordham in education. I was originally going to be an adolescent education teacher, and so I student taught in the Bronx. I saw firsthand what education and inequality looks like, and coming back to Ansonia and Derby and seeing, they were underfunded, and it makes me so angry because the kids, I call them my kids because they're all my kids, right? I'm responsible for supporting all of them. It makes me so angry because they all deserve to have a fully funded school. And so every year I was putting a bill in saying fully fund ECS, do it and do it now. And have testified on it and have harangued our chairs and really fought for it, alongside so many wonderful people. I know Susan's fought for it and so many others, Representative Curry, who's leading the education committee, has been a real fighter for it too, and I'm so appreciative. He came down and toured one of my schools and got to see firsthand what underfunding does. So we got an extra $150 million in the budget this past year for ECS funding, and in my district, our total education cost share grant is $137,663,816. We've really accelerated the formula and invested millions more. I keep a chart because I'm a nerd. I keep a chart that shows the increases each year.
Oh, so do I. I have it hanging in my kitchen.
Yeah. I actually give handouts. I give handouts because I want folks to. I try to show my work. I don't want people to be guessing. I don't want it to be. I don't want it to be just, me saying, yeah, I got more money. Anyone can say they want more money. Deliver the money and show your work. And so I have a handout, and I show exactly how much it increased money every year.
That's right. And it's according to that formula that was required by a Horton versus Meskel case, and we're finally living up to what that was requiring back in the 1980s. So I am absolutely thrilled, and unfortunately we are winding down to our last minute. Cara, Representative Rochelle, tell us a couple of things just before we run. One thing.
Tell you a couple of things. I'm so proud to be doing the work that I'm doing for the community. It is my entire heart to be fighting for the area. I did a tally, and I've brought in over $223 million in 5 years and increased, grants and funding, everything from education to fire funding to nonprofit funding. You name it, we've gotten it. And it's just, I'm so looking forward to continuing to do this work, build people up, build a community up, build families up, because that's what life's about. And so it is a joy to do this work.
Thank you so much for being with us here on Let's Talk About It. We appreciate your work so much. I love working with you, Representative Rochelle, and I look forward to working with you in another election cycle. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If I lived in the Valley, I'd run to the polls to vote for you, Kara.
All right, Kara.
Thank you so much.
Take care, and everybody, see you next week in a brand new show.